Good to see you guys all on this incredible Sunday. Yeah, it is Mother's Day. Did not realize it was going to be a Mother's Day stream, but I appreciate everybody who's watching this live. If you're end up watching this afterwards, of course, it's Mother's Day. I have an incredible guest for today. Wow. Having some difficulties there, some little technical difficulties. As most of you know, I do a lot of the unboxings for a lot of the miniature games. As you can see, I got Star Wars Legion stuff back here behind me. I have a room full of Games Workshop, Marvel Crisis Protocol, just tons and tons of miniatures, all from when I had the game store, which was called the Game Store back before 2018. I am really excited to have this guest on because he is a guy that is probably one of the best painters of miniature games that I've ever seen. He went to one of the biggest events that had the very first Marvel Crisis Protocol miniature game painting competition called The Worthy. And as you can tell by the title, this guy is certified. So let's go ahead and bring him on out, everyone. Johnathan Ho. Hey, how's it going, Johnathan?
That's Ben. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Man, doing great. So certified worthy, man. No one else has that title. Like one and only, man. One and only. You got them both. You knocked out clean sweep of all the places that you end up putting in. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Johnathan Ho. I am a project manager at a health technologies company, so that's my full-time job. I do paint miniatures on the side, so it's a hobby, and I do some moderate commission work, but I try not to overwhelm myself. So for the most part, most of my painting is just personal stuff. I started painting probably back in 2000s, right around the time that third edition 40K came out. So I was born and raised in Games Workshop products. I did that for about a decade. I think I entered my first painting contest around 2006. And that was the first Golden Demon they had in Toronto. I ended up placing bronze in the 40K singles. I went again to Golden Demon in Chicago the year afterwards, and I did a bronze in the fantasy unit category and a gold in the large monster category. I was going to go again in 2008, but I had just graduated college, started my working career, and that was also the year that they closed down North America's Games Workshop division. And so they stopped hosting Golden Demons, especially in Canada. And just a combination of things meant that I stopped competing for a number of years. I didn't enter another painting contest until 2013, I believe it was. And that was the first year I went to Adepticon, and I think also the first year that they had Crystal Brush. So I went there with a couple of friends. I wasn't intentionally going to enter, but my friends encouraged me just to bring some models along because I was going to be there anyways. So I entered a unit into the fantasy category, which won bronze. I entered, silver for the unit. I entered a fantasy monster, which won bronze. I entered the 40K vehicle, which won bronze, and then 40K singles, which won silver. And then I didn't compete again for a number of years because that was around the time. Pretty much all of my the phases of my life where I stopped competing coincided with major changes in my personal life or my career life. So 2013 was when the company I was currently at ended up closing its doors in Canada. And I got a job that required me to move to Las Vegas. So I moved down there. I lived there for a few years. And the circle I was in there didn't really play a lot of competitive games. They weren't competitive painters. So it was a lot more of a casual narrative environment, played a lot more board games. And so playing along with them and hanging out with them meant that I wasn't competing as much. I just didn't have the drive or the energy to try and compete while I was focusing on building the relationships there while also focusing on my career. I ended up moving back in 2017 to Canada, went to my first Adepticon since 2013 and 2019. I entered the Resin Beast painting contest and I won bronze there.
Hmm.
And that was falling off of a painting seminar with Sergio Calvo, who, if any of you know, is a multiple Golden Demon and multiple Crystal Brush winner. So the stuff that he taught me, the technique, sort of revolutionized the way that I approached miniature painting, and it gave me that new drive and that new different approach to tackle miniature painting, and allowed me to not just speed up my painting, but also accelerate my progress up until that point.
So you leveled
And
up.
yeah,
You
pretty
leveled
much.
up.
Because like I grew up in a time before social media, and I think probably up until I would say 2013, 2014, a lot of my painting was self-learned. It was more I would see a cool painted miniature either in a magazine, most likely, or sometimes online. I would try and reverse engineer how they got that technique, and then I would spend months perfecting it. So wet blending, as an example, I probably spent 8 months just doing nothing but wet blending shields and bone and stuff until I nailed it down without any tutorials or references or teachers to really tell me what to do. So I think people have it lucky nowadays with the plethora of tutorials and stuff on social media, where it is so much easier now for people to learn and develop. And um, yeah, that's what I experienced.
We need to let everybody know that you also have started doing tutorials to kind of help share to the next generation of painters as well.
Yeah. So shameless plug, I have a YouTube channel. I think Blevins will have the link in the...
Yeah, it's pinned here, and it's also in the description below.
So I do short form tutorials every week, and then I have longer full length tutorials on my Patreon. So I vary between the flavor of the month for me. So for now, it's Marvel Crisis Protocol, but I will be pivoting to Shatterpoint when it comes out next month. And then I dabble a bit in 40K and fantasy, but I don't really play those games as a focus anymore. At least not in the sense where I'm painting a lot for them. So most of what I do is, for now, Atomic Mass games.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your awesome.
No, that's fine. That's cool.
So I take you were watching all these tutorials online, right, through YouTube, like with the Calvin or Calvi.
So we actually had him in for an in-person painting seminar. So this was actually the start of his journey as well. So I think his seminar with us was the first time that he came to North America to do an in-person seminar. So it was a little bit awkward. Language was a bit of a barrier. And because our group was fairly large, it was like a 16-person class, we didn't have good one-on-one time. So I don't want to say that the class was incredible value front to back, but I still did learn a bit from it. I think I would have preferred to pay a little bit more for a one-on-one session, or maybe even like 4-to-1, I think is probably the maximum I would do. And like, as a tangent, that's also why I have a hard time signing up for painting classes, especially at Adepticon, because the classes are so big. I don't think you get great value unless it's more just like an intro basic level course where they're teaching you like very simple stuff. So yeah, we had him in, I think 2018. We got the painting seminar. I spent a year practicing on large pieces. I did the Resin Beast for 2019. I got bronze. And then we were going to go again, but then because of COVID, we ended up taking a break for a number of years. Everyone's in lockdown. And so for me, it's sort of just, I bounced around between finishing off old projects as well as continuing to just develop, working on both larger pieces and focusing on storytelling. So one of the biggest things I've never really done up until like 2019 was do dioramas or duels. None of my painting was narrative focused. It was all like technical painting with freehanding, non-monometal, and wet blending and all that stuff. And when I was speaking to the judges and the other competition winners, they said that narrative, or the lack thereof, was sort of what I failed to do and why I didn't place as well as I did. And so in the months leading up to Adepticon 2023, for my Path of the Worthy contest, I knew right away that the diorama piece was the one I wanted to focus on, specifically because I wanted to focus on developing and telling a narrative. So that's where I'm at. The pieces that I entered for singles and squads, I had intentionally or originally wanted to make intentional pieces for them, but other projects got in the way. We were playing in some of the other events at Adepticon, so the Age of Sigmar team tournament took up a lot of my time. The Path of the Worthy entry took, I think, 2 more weeks than I expected. And so I ended up not having the time to actually make specific entries for those. So I ended up grabbing some Sentinels I painted in December and the Hulkbuster that I had done in the summer prior. entered those in, not really expecting to win the Mjolnir trophy. I was going for the gold, I think, as a benchmark for my standard of painting. That was what I was aiming for. But clean sweeping was an unexpected surprise for me, and I was both shocked, but also, I guess, pretty euphoric that it actually happened. And I think, or I hope, that it doesn't happen again next year. I'd actually be really disappointed if I clean swept again.
So you go back and you pull these items off your shelf that you've done back in the summer, back in December. Do you touch them up at all? Do you do anything, any additions to them to try to maybe spruce them up a little bit?
So while the Sentinel and Hulkbuster pieces weren't specifically painted for competition, they were painted as centerpiece models. So I did spend, I think the Hulkbuster was like 150 hours, and I think I probably spent 40 to 50 hours on each of the Sentinels. So they were already painted to a pretty decent quality. So I didn't really go back and touch them up, except for the Hulkbuster's smoke effect. I wasn't quite happy with how it was painted originally, so I did repaint that. But otherwise, I just took the models off the shelf and entered them.
Cool. Well, I want to get into a couple of the models. Like, I'm going to end up starting with the diorama piece. The probably the best. One of the best diorama pieces that I've seen. I think it's absolutely incredible. The attention to detail was absolutely insane, and I'd love to get your take on how you blocked this all out, and what your thought process was when you were actually kind of creating it. And let's go ahead and bring that up now. So this is the Spider-Man Doc Ock diorama piece that you actually ended up entering. This is the before any kind of painting or anything done to it. Walk us through this if you don't mind.
So the actual brainstorming process for this piece started back in the summer. I didn't settle on Dr. Octopus Spider-Man to begin with, but I knew like way back then that I wanted to do a diorama for the contest. And so I bounced around between a various number of figures or pieces that I could potentially combine. And for whatever reason, it always circled back to this Rivals panel because of the way that the models were sculpted. They were designed to be interactive, and so it was just easy for me, because I'm not a very strong sculptor, to take those pieces and already have a jumping point where they have some sort of interaction or they are connecting. And it was just a matter of composing the piece in a way that brought them closer together. So these two figures are actually from their Rivals panel, but the way that they're positioned in the Atomic Mass diorama, they're actually fairly far apart. I think they're probably like 4 inches apart. And I knew I wanted to bring them closer. And the challenge, I guess, was trying to figure out how to mount them to the piece in a way that I could have them almost face to face. And I was doing my almost annual Marvel movie binge when I remembered that there was a scene in the Sam Raimi films for the original Spider-Man trilogy where he actually has Dr. Octopus fighting around the subway. And I remember when I first saw that scene when the film first came out, how unique and interesting the camera angles panned as the characters were fighting. And I wanted to capture that in the actual diorama piece itself. And so right away, I knew that I wanted to go in with a non-conventional way of mounting the piece, which meant that I wouldn't be doing a backdrop. More than likely, it would be a much more vertical piece. And then from there, it sort of just came together fairly simply. Once I made the decision to rebuild the tentacles and actually got the pieces and components to make it, it all just came together. Yeah, there was no real challenge once I'd gotten the tentacles in there. Backing track a bit, because the tentacles that came on the original model are basically fixed. They go together on the model a certain way at a certain angle with a certain twist. They didn't really work for my original idea. And so I'd scrapped them early on, made the decision to rebuild them. And I'd gone through a couple of different iterations to try and figure out how to make them. My first thought was trying to model them and print them in 3D. And then I was going to make them out of like brass rod and tubing. And then eventually it was plasticard. And then once I settled on the plasticard and I knew that it was actually feasible and fairly easy with a heat gun, it became fairly simple to figure out, okay, well, I want Octopus here. I want Spider-Man here. How do I make the tentacles and position them in a way to get them fighting. And then once the models were actually posed on the piece, creating the backdrop was fairly straightforward. It was just putting pieces together.
Did you draw it out? Or did you
No.
just go straight plastic to glue and let's make it happen?
So the actual plinth itself comes with a fairly large brass tube because you're meant to mount busts or larger pieces on it. So
Right.
I basically did a lot of dry fitting. I had Dr. Octopus blue tacked to this massive brass rod. And then I blue tacked Spider-Man to the base of the plinth. And then I just used some copper wire to position the tentacles and sort of just dry fit and make the tentacles in a variety of positions until I'd found the position that I wanted the two figures to be interacting with. And then once I had that, it was just a matter of fine tuning how close or how far apart they were. And then once I had that, I could make the tentacles. What the tentacles made, it came down to, okay, well, how are the background components? What are they going to be interacting with? I wanted him interacting with a brick wall. And then from there, it was just like, okay, I'm going to find a Victorian window to 3D print, got some plastic card for the tubing on the side, and the explosions just reused from the Arrivals panel.
Incredible. And have you done tons of customs before this? Or is this just like you dabble with it a little bit and then you're like, hey, I want to go ahead and try this, and then you end up winning?
I've dabbled in converting and scratch building a little bit before. And I'd actually done an entirely custom army during the pandemic. So 2020, 2021, I did my Keratin Overlords. And for that army, I ended up doing a lot more scratch building, not so much sculpting, but I worked with plastic art a lot, and it was a material I'm fairly comfortable with. So it was a pretty natural segue to go from that to this. The only difference is with my Keratin, I could be a little bit more haphazard because it was supposed to be like scrap metal, junkyard sort of stuff.
Right.
With this one, it had to be a little more polished, a little bit more refined. And I couldn't be as sloppy with the cutting or the scratch building. So it did take a little bit more time, but I think the end result was definitely worth it.
We'll definitely touch back on the Keratin Overlords because I think they are phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal. They remind me very much of squats. Like everybody was like, "Man, I wish we got squats back." And then of course they bring out the Votan, but I mean, like I think you did a great job, and you definitely made it look like it is a scrapyard effect, but we'll get into that when we move over to the Games Workshop section. But I just want to point out a little bit about this. So this is the piece. Now, obviously, it's not painted or anything, but this got me. I know it seems such a tiny detail, but man, I thought this was incredible. To have him swinging from one of the tentacles. Mm-hmm. I thought that was such a great addition to this for sure. We're gonna go ahead and go look from a different angle. You got the window here that you were showing off. Again, another amazing detail that even the people at Adepticon were freaking out about when you watch them talk about this. The camera, the Peter Parker camera that was webbed in here. Something that also I'm pretty sure you took from the Sam Raimi, right?
So funnily enough, neither of those were intentional as storytelling elements to begin with.
Really?
When I first built the piece, Dr. Octopus was mounted to the base with only his top two tentacles, and there was no structural integrity. The entire thing kept wobbling, and I knew that it was going to break. And so I was trying to find ways to increase the mounting points that connected the entire thing to the base to give it a little more stability. So the webbing that attaches Spider-Man to Dr. Octopus, it was from the rival panel. It was originally connecting two of the pillars together, and so it's one long piece with a couple of little strands shooting out. So I cut off all the little strands, took the long piece, and I connected Spider-Man to Dr. Octopus tentacles to try and anchor everything together. It didn't work, but it ended up being a neat storytelling element. So I was like, okay, I'll keep that. And then I used that cut off corner piece to do the webbing on the window. And I had actually not originally intended to put a camera in there until I had watched Dallas Kemp's stream because he was working on his piece. And he had actually put a camera in the bottom corner of his duel between Green Goblin and Spider-Man. And I remember that Peter Parker loves to take photos of all his fights. And I was like, shit, I'll put that in. So that ended up being sort of just an extra thing that I put in that enhanced the storytelling element unintentionally.
I mean, like absolutely incredible. I mean, the happy accident, right? Or happy
pretty much, yeah.
Happy deal. So let's go ahead. This this is the painted version. Which how many hours you put in this thing?
Probably about 150 hours.
100.
I'd say about 20, 25 hours for the building, and then another 120, 125 for the actual painting.
Wow. What was the hardest part?
Probably doing the tentacles, not from a technical point, just because it's a tube or a cylinder, so they're actually fairly easy to paint. It was more the angle of them and the wobble, because this piece wasn't really sub-assembled. The only separate component was the window. Everything else was already built, so having to actually work around the different angles, making sure not to put too much pressure to risk snapping anything, and then just making sure that the lighting all made sense, because the entire piece just keeps wobbling. So it just I had it braced with a couple of sprue points attached to the plinth to try and hold them, but every time I would touch a brush, the model would still just like dip. And so that was probably the biggest challenge of actually working on them, especially when you got to the top tentacle, the one that's holding the rebar.
Right.
That thing would wobble like nobody's business.
Really? So
Yeah.
it looks pretty structurally sound right here, but you're saying it was definitely not.
No, not at all. Like I think you could put gentle pressure on it and it'd be fine, but if you like really pressed on it, you could bend or snap the plastic card.
Man, absolutely. There's the camera. Man, the shades. I mean, look, dude. I mean, it won for a reason. You know what I'm saying? It won for a reason. Yeah. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, let's see. I kind of want to bring up the Hulkbuster next, if that's cool. Please bear with me. All right. So here we have the Hulkbuster. I mean, like you said, you did this like almost a year before you did the summer previous. So when you walked me through this, I take it this is the base from this is the actual real base. This isn't a custom base or anything. Go ahead. When you tell us a little bit about it.
So the biggest challenge for me with this one was tackling non-metal metal on a large scale. So up until this point, I've done non-metal metal before, but usually only on small or select components or parts of a model, and it doesn't have the complexity of metal reflecting on metal. And so with this piece, I really wanted to push the limits of what I could do with non-metallic painting, and then doing non-metal metal red as well. I think red is one of those colors that can be very challenging to paint because it can end up being too pink or too orange very easily. And with this piece, it was those two challenges of doing non-metal metal and doing a convincing metallic red. That's sort of where I approached this piece. Again, this wasn't painted for competition, right, but I did spend the time to basically paint every component fairly immaculately. I probably I guess 150 hours on the entire piece spread over like a month. And it was basically just like making sure that I painted each piece to a pretty high standard. If I had known I was painting this for competition, I could have probably spent another like 100, 150 hours polishing it up. But I think what I went into it, looking to learn and to develop, I think it was a great success. Again, I'd originally painted the smoke in sort of a grayish yellow tone, which I liked at the time, but I knew going in for a competition, it wasn't as good. So I did end up repainting it closer to the box art, try and get more vibrancy and more color into that base explosion. And I think that change was pretty solid, which I've done that in the beginning.
I really like these details down at the bottom. Now, I've been seeing this a lot lately, and I don't know if you were the one that did it. Did you do a lockjaw where you also added the comic books, or was that another painter that I saw?
I've painted lockjaw.
Did you do the newspapers and stuff like this down at the bottom?
That's a good question. Yes, I did. He has a
Okay.
newspaper behind his foot.
Yeah, I was about to say. I think that was you as well. What made you start doing this? Which I think is just I mean, it shows motion. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's really awesome. What made you want to start doing this? Like, where'd you get that idea from?
I mean, I definitely wasn't the first one to do it, so I can't really say that I originated putting newspapers and posters on the base. Like you're alluding to, part of it is to convey motion. Part of it on particular pieces as well, like on Hulkbuster or Quicksilver, it does help to balance out the figure a little bit. Not so much on Hulkbuster because he's so big, but Quicksilver, as an example, he's very forward leaning. It's the exact same pose as the Hulkbuster, but the model is so far forward on one end that it feels too front heavy. And so having newspapers or something in the back flying outwards helps to balance out that forward motion, and it creates a bit more of a curve back upwards, almost like a Nike check. So that's one way of using those things to create a balance. The other is also because they're very limited in the base designs that come out of the kits. And so after a point, if you're doing the same base over and over again, you end up having the same details that do pop up. So having unique elements like posters or debris, fire hydrants on bigger bases is a way to break up that uniformity and create a bit more variety in their limited selection. Because I think they have like 4 small bases, 2 large bases, and 1 big base.
Cool. And I'm gonna go ahead and go to the final one that you. Sorry, I don't have the. Just takes a little bit. I thought these were incredible, as well. So here you have your Sentinels, like absolutely incredible.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun to work with. Having painted the Hulkbuster, I was a lot more comfortable in doing non-metal metal.
You see a lot of the same techniques in this.
Yeah, I think a little less polished than the Hulkbuster, and that's largely reflected in the time that I spent on them, despite the models actually being bigger. Part of it was because they do have a lot less detail, especially in like the armor plating and stuff. And the colors, I think, are also a lot easier to paint than doing a red, which requires a lot more fine tuning. I think if I had known I was painting them for a contest, I probably would have spent a lot more time on them. Like personally, looking at them, I find, or I know that there are a lot of flaws and a lot of errors. I don't think the painting is as crisp as the Hulkbusters was, but I think like they're still great as centerpiece models. I think had the competition been stronger in the squad, especially from a narrative perspective, they probably should have lost. And like I was alluding to before, I hope that a lot of the entries next year from everyone also raises the bar. Like I want to see other painters really step up and challenge for the mantle. I don't want to just be the guy that's always taking the prize.
Well, being the champion, the reigning champion, the only champion of the Path of the Worthy for Marvel Crisis Protocol, are you looking at possibly doing a road to Adepticon next year and like maybe have a series of videos showing some of the items that you're looking to bring there? Or are you going to keep it all hush hush and secretive and just kind of reveal them at the event?
I'm going to keep them hush hush and reveal them at the end.
Nice.
Yeah. Like it's not like I'm trying to gotcha, but I think it's also really cool to have the project as a secret. And then when you do the big reveal at the event, because no one's ever seen it before, it does create that excitement. It draws a lot of attention and engagement. So it works both for the social media front. And then it also means that because I'm not saturating my social media with posts about the same project over and over and over again, people don't get bored of it. It stays fresh. So yeah, I already have a couple of ideas in mind, but you probably won't hear about them until Adepticon next year.
Nice. Well, one of the things I thought, obviously your work was great. I wanted to say, like, talk about keeping something hush hush and then bust it out and causing a big stir. Like, did you see the arcade tabletop, the X-Men arcade? Like, basically was a funhouse pinball machine looking deal. Is a 3D printed deal that people made some tables out of.
Yeah, I played in the Marvel 2v2, And our last game of the day was actually on the arcade table. And if I'm being honest, I hated it.
You hate it?
I'm
you
not
hate
so
it for gameplay from a gameplay standpoint, or you tell me you hated it
from a narrative perspective. The
Really?
gameplay itself is fine. I think the table plays fine, and they were painted well. Don't get me wrong. This isn't from I hate the way they executed it. It's just from a narrative perspective, it ruins my immersion. Largely because I don't, for me, because I'm not really big into the comics. There's no point of reference for me for a funhouse theme. So when I first saw it, my thought was, well, we've all been shrunk down and we're playing on an actual pinball machine. And for me, that was just like, why? I only realized, I think, a month or two afterwards that the funhouse thing is an actual comic thing where it's a life-size pinball funhouse, which I think made it a little bit better, or it softened the blow. But at the time, I didn't like it. I think going into the day, I was like, I hope I don't play on one of those tables because I just didn't.
So Spider-Man and the X-Men on Super Nintendo, there was a funhouse. It's called Spider-Man X-Men Arcade's Revenge, and they have a funhouse level as well. But yeah, I visually looking at it, not playing. I thought visually the models looked incredible. The sculpts looked incredible. The 3D printing was done well. The painting was done well. It was very surprising, and it was like the talk of the Adepticon feed when you read it from the Marvel Crisis Protocol part. But so these are the two. These are not the main ones. They're the two company ones, right?
Yeah, these are the Mark IVs. So I actually painted, I think, the Prime first.
Oh, you painted the Prime first?
Well, because he was released first, and then we didn't get the two Mark IVs until like a week afterwards, or like 2 weeks afterwards. So I painted him first, spent a little more time on him, and then I painted the two afterwards. And personally, I think because I did them back to back to back, I think by the time I did the third one, I was definitely itching to be done with the project.
Right.
And so there are certain parts of them, especially in the back, where I'm just like phoning it in. I'm like, whatever, just throw on some highlights, and I use my airbrush to cheat a lot of the blends.
Man, these are like, I mean, it's something to strive for, right? Like, looking at these pictures, man, I can't paint anything, man. I can't paint a wall in my house. Like, I love the idea of painting miniatures. I tried doing Necrons way back in the day, and it was just dry, like gunmetal dry brush and green, and I was like, oh man, I suck so bad at this. But man, I mean, this definitely gives people a goal to strive for sure.
Well, I find it's funny you say that, because I think that a lot of painting, and I would say like 80% of it at a minimum, is purely mechanical. And I think even if you remove artistic ability or talent from the equation, I think most people could probably achieve a pretty good standard of painting, because it is just mechanics. It's going through the motions, and like barring physical limitations or other such things, I think most people could probably, with practice, achieve a certain level. Yes, you may not be able to uniquely come up with certain color schemes or techniques. You may not be able to push that boundary in terms of creating like a unique diorama or something like left field creativity wise. But I think most people could follow a tutorial, follow a recipe or a palette of colors, and achieve a certain result if they put in the practice and the time. So I think everyone starts somewhere. If you look at my first few models, they're all trash as well. But I think with practice, with intentional practice, I think everyone can achieve a pretty good standard of painting. Yeah. I think I lost him.
Hey, did you have fun?
Yeah, sitting in
Have
silence.
fun hanging out? Did you talk to everybody and let them all know that internet is horrible?
No,
Hate
I
it.
just have to hang awkwardly.
Sorry about that. Let me bring this back up. Yeah, man, they've been adding fiber to my area, so they've been working on the lines, but they said they weren't going to work on Sunday. So I was like, great, and of course, like they're probably out there banging around, banging and clanging. But go ahead. You were talking about it being mechanical.
Yeah, so techniques like wet blending, feathering, glazing, edge highlighting, all of these things are like they're known quantities in the sense that it doesn't require much beyond knowing how to apply them. And I think with practice, anyone can do them. I have a lot of friends who are not creative people by any means in terms of their backgrounds. They're like in finance, they're in accounting. Some of them are lawyers, and even they can paint to a pretty high standard. So I think pretty much anybody can paint to a pretty decent quality if they intentionally practice and aim for it. Where it becomes challenging, especially in that last 20%, is when you are trying to compete, especially creating something unique does require, I think, a little bit more creativity. And that can be a bit challenging for other people. But if you're just painting for yourself or tabletop, I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't paint to this degree, especially if you have someone to copy off of, someone to do all the hard work for you in terms of what colors to use, where to put them, and you're just basically following the instructions.
I mean, that's a great mindset. Definitely, yeah. I mean, definitely encouraging for sure. I, these are obviously incredible pieces. You did a phenomenal job. Obviously, I mean, you won for a reason. I keep saying that because it is just absolutely crazy how well this went and how you swept the deal. And let's look at the fruit of your labor with this guy. This is it. You got Odin. You got the hammer of
The
Thor.
Mjolnir, yeah. I don't know what it is with companies making these massive trophies. Are like they're cool. Don't get me wrong. Resin Beast did the exact same thing where their trophy was this giant, like 15-pound resin block, and I'm like, it's cool. I have nowhere to put this, and
I will gladly put it right here if you need a place to put it. No, I'm just kidding.
So
I mean, yeah. Were they heavy?
It's heavy. So that thing is like 33.5 pounds, 34 pounds for the Odin trophy.
Yeah.
I think what I'm gonna do is so that I'll keep the one. I'm gonna get a little plaque made or a little custom plaque to put on there for the year and the entry. And if I do win it again, knock on wood, I'm not gonna take a second trophy. I'm just be like, I'll keep my original one, and I'm just gonna get a little plaque made that I can attach to the trophy, so that as I keep winning or when I keep winning, I can add them onto the trophy because I don't have room for more than one of those. And it was the same with the Mjolnir as well. And I don't want 3 of those, so I just took the one. I'll probably do a plaque for each of my entries this year, and then if I do win it again next year, I'll do the same thing.
So the crew that you have where you're at right now, you said you're in Canada right now, right?
Correct. Yes.
So your crew that you're with in Canada that you probably play with, and you also probably paint. I would like to think you paint with them as well. I don't know if you do that or not, but did they think you were going to win? Like, were they like, man, you're going to win this, man, you're going to sweep the categories?
I think once they'd seen some of the other entries in the category, they were fairly confident that I would do pretty well, especially with that diorama. I think they thought the Sentinels would actually win the Odin trophy as opposed to the diorama.
Really?
But I guess it's because they hadn't seen the diorama up close yet. It was mainly just what they saw in the cabinets, and they thought that the Sentinels would pop out a lot more, being pure non-metal metal. But I think they knew that I would be doing pretty well. Whether I would win the actual trophy or not, like we've competed enough that we know that anything goes, especially in a contest where narrative is a huge factor. Judges' preference and sort of what they do or don't like can come into play a lot. But yeah, we were fairly confident.
Cool. Well, I am going to bring this down, and I want to show your Keratin Overlords, because I think that they are awesome.
Fun.
Yes, they were absolutely.
The army's a lot of fun to play too. When I first started them in 2020, it was pretty much 40k simulator in Age of Sigmar, and they weren't as enjoyable as they could have been. It was a real negative play experience, I think. So I definitely think that the new iteration is a lot more engaging for both players, and it's not just rolling dice and having your opponent remove models.
So these are the Keratin Overlords. These are dwarves basically from Age of Sigmar, the dwarf army. I really do think that these little junkards are amazing, and also you have the different squads, different colored. I don't know if a lot of people know that it's probably why you have them different colored, so you can know which squads they were. Right? I'm not. Yeah. So yeah, when you walk us through this idea, which I mean, like, look at this. I want to, like, how crazy is that? How much of this is custom? How much of it is just scraps that you had sitting around? Like, go ahead and walk us through it, man, because I'm excited about this.
So, my style of playing any game really is anything that has movement and board control. I don't necessarily need to just push models into and like smash. I like armies and forces that can move around and have a lot of tricks on the table. So, Guild Ball, Fishermen, Butchers. For Age of Sigmar, I started with Night Haunt, and they have a lot of that deep striking teleporting stuff.
Oh man, I love Night Haunt.
At some point, I am bored of them, and so I wanted to pivot into something that had a lot of those same movement qualities. And so I think Keratin was a top choice for me. It was either them or Sylvaneth. I ended up with Keratin because I like the idea of a steampunk style army, but I hated every bit of Games Workshop's KO aesthetic. I think it just looks awful. I don't like it. And I think when I committed to doing the army, I knew I wanted to scratch build a lot of it. The main inspiration for the thing came from Ian McHugh's artwork. So for those of you who don't know who he is, Ian McHugh does a lot of these sort of wasteland sci-fi junk ship illustrations. And he does them for like spaceships, he does them for floating ships, he does them for astronauts and stuff like that. So I used a lot of his artwork as the starting point to first work on some of the ships and then to develop the characters. It was also a way for me to work on my sculpting ability and my ability to make things from scratch, because that's a weakness that I've always had in my hobby. So pretty much everything in the army is scratch built. Some of it does use components from original models, in particular the halflings. So a lot of them are the Blood Bowl halflings from Games Workshop, but they're reposed, a lot of sculpting. I
didn't realize that, though. I didn't realize you used the Blood Bowl models.
Yeah, because I'm not good sculpting from scratch. So because I did need some infantry, the original idea was to have halflings for all of my unit champions and heroes. And every unit was essentially their posse of robots, and they would go around collecting scrap metal and fighting off whatever creatures they have. So the idea was basically to have a limited number of living creatures and have robots for everything else. And then the color coding came as a result of just a practical perspective. Because they are not stock models, you can't really tell what they are. And so I needed a very easy way to color code everything, to be like, okay, this blue unit, they're Arcanauts. These three separate units of Balloon Boys, they're riggers. Here's the three colors, so you know which unit is which. And then the ship's just based on the size. So the blue one's the Ironclad. You have 2 gun haulers. The orange is a new addition, which is the frigate. But yeah, so pretty much everything is scratch built. The infantry are using the Blood Bowl halflings, and then I use some of the new Votan for some of my new additions. So I think the Thunderers, the Admiral, and the Codewright use the new Votan models. And I think as I expand the army, I'll probably pivot more to and use more of the Votan stuff. My plan is to bring the army to Adepticon. I'm not sure if I want to do it in Age of Sigmar singles yet or what's happening, but in order to try and get a Warhammer TV, I'll probably end up replacing all of the robots with halfling or Votan conversions.
Like a little domo right here, little domo.
Yeah, a lot of the graffiti was inspired by Mike Shinoda.
Nice.
My girlfriend and I are huge Linkin Park fans.
Park, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out a graffiti style that would suit the army. And when my girlfriend first saw the robot, she's like, "These look exactly like Mike Shinoda's little graffiti drawings." And so I was scrolling
Nice.
through Pinterest. I took a look at some of his stuff, and yeah, I drew a lot of inspiration for that.
Yeah, he actually followed me on Twitter for a little bit. I thought that was pretty neat. I was going through, a whole bunch of, remember the name. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
not Lincoln Park, but I can't.
Fort Minor, I think it was.
Yeah, Fort Minor. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just blasting it everywhere, and I got a follow from him, and I was like flipping out. Yeah, I love absolutely. His beats are crazy, but the sickest beats. That's one of the lines in the deal. But man, again, the amount of detail in this is insane. So, how many hours do you think you got in these guys, or is it even countable?
I think the Ironclad is probably about 300 hours.
Wow.
Like a lot of it was because it was the first ship I built. A lot of it was testing, dry fitting, because it is all scratch built. A lot of the time goes into that. I am getting faster with the army. I think the gun haulers are probably about 100 hours each. I probably spent, I don't know, 20, 30 hours per unit. I think the frigate was another 200 hours.
200 hours on this guy.
Yeah.
So is the plan to branch out into the other, like you talked about doing Shatterpoint? Is it just because it's a larger scale, and or have you done any of the Star Wars Legion stuff?
So I grew up on Star Wars. Shatterpoint's a huge nostalgia thing for me. I looked at Legion, but no one plays it, so I never really got into it. I did play X-Wing a lot when I was in Vegas,
Nice.
And for me, Shatterpoint's probably going to be a big painting project. We have a couple of people in my hobby group who are going to pick it up. More than likely, my games will be limited to 1 or 2 opponents unless I go to an event. So for me, it's just more, this is a thing that I want to paint because I love the universe. And the models look fantastic, and I don't really care about playing games with them.
Did you get to play at Adepticon? Did you get to do any of the demos and stuff of it?
I did. I saw their demo on Rails, which really wasn't a demo. It was more them just showing you the mechanics. The game seems fun. It's a combination of, it feels like Star Wars Legion, Marvel Crisis Protocol, and then they have that that unique sort of 3-phase mission mechanic that seems very interesting, very dynamic. I'm looking forward to actually playing that game.
Yeah, like so you haven't done any of the you haven't painted any Legion models?
Nope.
Nope, just with the higher scale. What do you think about Shatterpoint being really terrain centric for the battles?
I think it's cool. I love when the actual table that you play on has not just a narrative component, but a mechanical component that can immerse you into the game itself. I played a lot of Mordheim and Necromunda as a kid, and those games had very similar effects where the table and the terrain had a huge impact on the game. And so I'm looking forward to not only working on the models for Shatterpoint, but actually working on creating a table or two specifically for that game.
Crazy. Well, man, let me go ahead and minimize this. So, what games are you currently playing?
Age of Sigmar, Marvel Crisis Protocol. I would say 40K, but I haven't played 40K in almost 2 years. The new edition's around the corner, so I'll probably dabble in some of that.
10th edition, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember the 10th edition of Warhammer, like just the Warhammer Fantasy came out. Like I had it in my store back then, and it was huge, and and it was like 5th edition for 40K, and now we're hitting 10th edition of 40K.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So I know that our group is looking to do a combat patrol campaign. So I'll probably either run my Necrons for that, or maybe I'll pick up an Eldar thing and do some build hand. But I don't really play 40K anymore. It's more of just like an occasional casual game. Same with Horus Heresy. We picked up that game when it first came out way back when. I think it was the 2nd edition back in like 2016, 2015. And then we picked it up again when it was released last summer. So I have a Blood Angels army up on the shelf somewhere. We'll probably
Nice.
play again next summer when they have the new Assault Marines and the new campaign books and stuff. I think that's
Yeah,
pretty much it, though.
I went and grabbed I grabbed all the new 30K stuff. I was really excited about it because the big giant boxes. I got like 3 copies of the giant box for some reason. I have no idea why, but I got 3 big giant copies of it, and I was like, man, I'm gonna open this. I'm gonna put it together. I'm gonna play it. Yeah, they're still sealed right over here to the side of me. But I mean, they're incredible boxes, very hefty, right?
Yep.
And I feel like they didn't take it serious. It kind of was like 30K was kind of like the Dominion box set from Age of Sigmar, that they just decided they were just going to dump on everybody, even though the Dominion box was incredible. I got like 6 copies of those sitting over there, the starter set. But
I
yeah,
think
man. So go ahead.
my problem with Heresy right now, when it first came out, like this most recent edition, there were a lot of flaws in the rule set that created a very skewed meta that was very easy to break. I think vehicles aren't in a good place. I think dreadnoughts are too powerful. And the fact that they didn't release combat arms or assault marines, despite many of the legions having that focus or being fairly strong with them, and then the amount of time it's taking for them to release anything, I think it's been almost a year and a half now, and they still haven't released infantry upgrade packs. They're releasing plastic sprues for resin vehicles, things like that. I think they've pushed the game into an area like Titanicus, where a lot of the interest in the game has died down, except for from the diehard fans. And I hope that they're able to revitalize the game and at some point continually release regular updates for it. Otherwise, that game's going to die.
Yeah, kind of like Battlefield Gothic.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, man, space battles.
I mean, that game had its own problems, but
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, we're hitting that hour mark. I didn't want to keep you very long. When you tell us about what you have going on and where everybody can find you.
So I post daily on my Instagram, and I have again those weekly tutorials on YouTube. What I'm currently working on right now is finishing off my Marvel backlog. So I have 1 more commission model for this current wave, and then I think I have 4 more models of my own, and then I'll be done everything I've bought for Marvel. Not the entire collection, but everything I own for it will be painted, so I can set that aside. I don't have anything that's unpainted for 40K, so I don't have to worry about that. When June comes, I'll be focusing a lot on Shatterpoint, and then as they release more for Seraphon, I'll be working on that as well, because that's our team tournament armies for Adepticon are going to be, I think, quad Seraphon. So
really,
yeah.
Nice.
So then we're focusing on that for.
Did you get the main box set?
I did, yeah. I picked that up, and I already had a croak, and I actually won the Lizardman Get Started box at Adepticon, so I got a free Troglodon. So that was good.
And so that one of these, was it Looney Curse? And there was one of these. I can't remember which one it was. Did you see the Star of Icto, Star Warden Icto from the Warhammer Fantasy Battles, the Warhammer Age of Sigmar, when they had the individual character boxes, like the big giant turtle, the Star Warden Icto box set?
I don't recall that one, no.
Okay, probably could. I'll show you. I'll show you after the show. But yeah, I'm again loved Lizardman. I thought they were awesome back then. I played when it was Fantasy Battles. I played Dark Elves. I love the Dark Elves. Buddy of mine played High Elves, which he was really excited, looking to see that come in. And then, of course, I think everybody loved Tomb Kings, which I love the OCR Bone Reapers and stuff that they came out with. I'd like to see, they're supposed to be having, I don't know if it's came out or not yet because I've been busy with other things, but they're supposed to be coming out with the rules for the old world, where you can actually bring some of those older models that you have into the fray. Basically, I haven't seen any updates on that or anything yet, but I'm really looking forward to that. Very interested in that. I did share your latest tutorial, your Ulick tutorial. I shared it on my page as well as I shared it on the Marvel Crisis Protocol page. I hope that was okay.
Yeah, that's
to
fine.
make sure
Yeah.
you got plenty of views on it. But man, absolutely fabulous having you on. I really do appreciate it. If you want to stick around after I end the stream, like I'll talk to you again just for a little bit. But you guys can check out Johnathan Ho. His YouTube channel is pinned on here, and it's also in the description below. The Facebook page also pinned here and down below. And I'll probably end up updating it to add his Instagram. I didn't get around to put the Instagram on there, so we'll make sure we get that information out there. And man, looking forward to seeing what you have to do. I mean, to think like the paint jobs you did now that won, like everything that you put out will be better than that from now on. I mean, just blows my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like everything that you do from now on will be better than what you put out, you know, at this event, because obviously you keep getting better with practice, better with time, and it's man, I can't wait to see what you have going on, and I really do appreciate you coming on as a guest.
Thank you for having me.
Cool, awesome. Everybody, definitely hit the like, subscribe. Make sure you go over there, check out Jonathan's channel, give him a like and subscribe. And sorry about all the technical difficulties, but we'll try to have you on again a little bit closer. I'd like to probably have you on with Shatterpoint too, whenever that happens, if you're available, because I'm a huge Star Wars fan and I love Shatterpoint. But we'll see about what we can do. Okay.
Yeah, we can figure it out.
Thank you everybody for watching. Until the next one.